one stage they were heading out, having managed just 2 points from their first 2 fixtures.
Ronaldo's gone down, he's coming off. There are going to be tears. This was his stage. He celebrates because he's the man that has won the European Championship for Portugal.
Limping through a perceived easy group without a win, only winning one match within 90 minutes and avoiding all of the big hitters en route to the final. There's a strong case that Portugal are the worst winner of an international tournament we've ever seen. But does that tell the whole story? Is Portugal 2016 a story of luck and fortune, or one of calculated risk? Join me as we delve back through the archives to uncover whether this is the story of the worst champions of all time. For decades, Portugal were the nearly men of international football. There was always talent amongst their ranks, but they could never quite dig out the victories to make themselves champions. In 2000, they had dazzled in the group stage, winning all 3 matches in a group of death comprising themselves, England, Germany and Romania, but were left deflated when a golden goal penalty from Zidane knocked them out in the semis. Yet it was Euro 2004 where it felt that the stars were aligning for Portugal. The tournament was heading for their country, and with stars such as Rui Costa, Luis Figo, Nuno Gomes and Deco, it was hard to look past the hosts as potential winners. Despite an opening night slip up to Greece, they recovered strongly, defeating Russia, Spain, England and the Netherlands en route to the final. Unexpectedly for them, it would be Greece whom they would meet once more in the final. And in spite of that loss, the Portuguese on home soil were heavy favourites. But once again, they found themselves coming up short, unable to unlock the defensive resilience of a truly stoic Greek side. However, as that golden generation failed to capitalise on their talent, a star was emerging within their ranks, one that many would pin their future hopes on for years to come. His name was Cristiano Ronaldo, and his brilliance soon journeyed from a flashy winger to a serial output machine, to one of the best players the game has ever seen. Alas, despite having one of the greatest ever amongst their roster, Portugal were unable to break their trophy drought. The semi-finals was the best they were able to muster in the years that followed. In fact, their worst results since the emergence of CR7 came in the tournament before Euro 2016, where Portugal failed to get out of the group at the 2014 World Cup. In the lead up to qualifying for Euro 2016, Portugal took the decision to fire their coach Paulo Bento, replacing him with fellow countryman Fernando Santos, who had taken Greece to the quarter-finals at Euro 2012 and to the knockouts for the first time in their history at the 2014 World Cup. He would go on to win every subsequent match in qualification, yet the optimism surrounding Portugal heading into the tournament would prove to be low, as referenced by the bookies' odds. France were the hosts, Germany the reigning world champions, Spain were the holders, but Portugal, sure they were pragmatic and dogged, but we'd seen far better Portugal sides in the past. Yet maybe that lack of spotlight, that lack of expectation, helped pave the way to glory. Confidence would be boosted though with Euro 2016 looming, as Portugal were drawn into Group F in what many considered to be the softest group in the entire tournament, as they were drawn alongside Austria, Hungary and Iceland. The latter was first up and a perfect opportunity to dust off any cobwebs in a match versus the tournament debutants, Iceland. With a population sitting just over 300,000, they were roundly expected to be plucky maybe, but certainly not spoilers. Nani opened the scoring midway through the first half in this one, as Portugal were on course for an opening game victory before Bjarnason was left unmarked at the back post, levelling the match. Portugal would go on to be utterly frustrated in this one, notching 25 shots, 10 of which came from Cristiano, but were unable to find a winner. In fact, Ronaldo would go on to accuse Iceland for having a small mentality in the post-match presser. But realistically, what did he expect? Iceland knew they couldn't go toe-to-toe with Portugal, so set out to frustrate them instead, a tactic that was undoubtedly very successful. Austria came next, a chance to banish the demons from the opening match, but once again, irritation, predictability and wastefulness would follow them into this one. The major talking point was Cristiano Ronaldo missing a penalty with 10 minutes to go as they had to settle for a goalless draw. At this stage, Portugal had taken 48 shots in their opening 180 minutes at the tournament and had scored just one goal. The final match with Hungary would be crucial. A loss would see them bail out the tournament in a second group stage exit in a row. Fortunately in this one, the goals would finally begin to flow as a Ronaldo brace would end his tournament drought. Unfortunately, however, this newfound goal-scoring flair would come at the cost of their defensive resilience, as Hungary went ahead 3 times in this one before it ended 3-all. Portugal though were through, but an important caveat to this is under any previous UEFA European Championship format they would have been out. The tournament's expansion to 24 teams had saved Portugal from another dismal group stage exit. They may have been on their way to the knockouts, but no one at this stage was fearing. No one was praising them. In fact, if anything, Portugal looked like a team that were going nowhere fast. As the tournament bracket took hold for the knockouts, Portugal were undoubtedly being counted out, and for good reason too. No nation had ever won the Euros having failed to win a single group match. But sometimes tournament football is about surviving. And this was evident in their last 16 encounter with Croatia, where for 116 minutes, nothing happened. No goals, no moments, no shots on target, nothing. Croatia were technically sound, but Portugal sat in a low block and soaked up that pressure. Then, with penalties looming, it all changed. Perisic thought he won it when his knockdown looked goal-bound, only for it to bounce off the post, but there was more heartbreak to come. As Portugal countered, the ball fell to Ronaldo, whose shot was saved, only for Quaresma to head into an empty net. It was the ultimate smash and grab. The Iberian nation had barely troubled Croatia's box for nearly 2 hours, but in one moment they had booked their place into the quarterfinals with Poland. Any hopes of Portugal was suddenly going to turn into a free-flowing attacking side, especially against opposition that on paper were of lower quality, were banished early in this one, as goal machine Robert Lewandowski opened the scoring with 2 minutes on the clock. Portugal though, as they had in 2004, appeared to have another future star on their hands, when their youngest ever tournament player Renato Sanchez buried an effort from the edge of the box to become the youngest goalscorer in the knockouts of the European Championships. But from here, the match dissolved into a slow-paced chess match, where the 90 minutes came and went, as did extra time, meaning it was penalties to find a victor. 5 perfect penalties from Portugal and one mighty Rui Patricio save sent Portugal into the final 4. The tournament's undeniable surprise package of Wales were the next opponent to face, who were flying high following a truly unforgettable goal from Hal Robson-Kanu over a much fancied Belgium. Here though, something strange happened. Portugal won a match in the 90 minutes and looked not too bad. 2 early second half goals from a towering Cristiano Ronaldo header, followed by the goalscorer turning to provider as his cross-come shot was redirected by Nani. It appeared that the Welsh heroics from earlier rounds had caught up with them physically as they struggled to impose themselves on this one. Remarkably, it seemed that maybe Portugal were saving their best for last. They were into the final with the host France, the team they'd have to beat. So here we were then. In spite of serial underperformance, lack of deliverance, lethargy and maybe even a little boredom, Portugal were in the final. Awaiting them was a strong France team, easily the best side they had assembled in a decade. Home soil was also seen as a major advantage, but that was something Portugal knew all too well wasn't always the silver bullet one would hope. And surely, if anyone could drag the Iberian nation to their first crown, it had to be Cristiano Ronaldo, their talismanic captain, one of the greatest players the game has ever known, but fate had other ideas. A strong Dimitri Payet tackle saw the Real Madrid superstar collapse to the floor in agony. He tried to no avail to continue and was soon stretchered off the pitch. The golden man was gone, and with him surely were Portugal's chances. The second half saw an onslaught of France pressure. Griezmann, Sissoko and Gignac all went close with chances, especially the latter finding the post in injury time, but yet again this Portugal side would go in the full 120 minutes. Eventually, surely, this stoic defence was going to crack, but it wasn't them on the receiving end of a gut puncher. Step forward Eder, a man who had just played 13 minutes at the tournament before this match, had only 3 goals in 28 caps and hadn't scored for Portugal for over 2 years. He picked up the ball 30 yards from goal, shimmied into a bit of space and fizzed a low strike that arrowed past Hugo Lloris with just 11 minutes to spare. From here, the resilience of this side had to be perfect. A revitalised Cristiano Ronaldo turned from goalscorer to de facto second manager as he transitioned into a man possessed, screaming instructions and urging his teammates on in a frenzy. The final whistle sounded at the Stade de France without another goal. Portugal had done it. Miraculously, they had done it. The nearly men of international football had got over the line in the most unbelievable of circumstances. But now we turn to the analysis. Was this Portugal triumph a pragmatic, gritty win, or are they quite simply the worst champions we've ever seen? It was clear from the outset that Fernando Santos wasn't attempting to create an attacking juggernaut of a side. He built a system that prioritised defensive solidity and collective discipline. Portugal mostly lined up in a 4-4-2, but this was less about the 2 forwards and more about the 2 banks of 4 behind the ball. Ronaldo and Nani, the line leaders, were not high intensity pressers of the ball. They would largely remain wide, waiting for counter-attack opportunities, whilst the midfield 4 would have to remain disciplined and structured. This was a team that controlled the space rather than the possession, and as such they were rarely carved open, barring that rather bizarre match with Hungary. The lack of imposition wasn't lost on fans and pundits alike, particularly in the knockout rounds. Against Croatia in the last 16, Portugal recorded just 5 shots in 120 minutes of football, and from the outside this looked like it was by design. There was certainly a whole lack of ambition to win in style. It was a mismatch compared to other nations at the tournament and what we had come to expect from winners of this competition, having seen Spain dominate the ball in the previous 2 tournaments. Instead, Portugal were almost passengers, keeping the tempo deliberately low and hoping for mistakes to capitalise on. And that's notwithstanding the results too. The group matches were diabolical for the most part. The last 16 clash with Croatia was comparable to watching paint dry. When you think of great champions in football, you think of teams that were tone setters, that wanted to dominate in all facets and would never shy away, and that really isn't what this Portugal side were. This was a triumph of attrition, a sort of battle royale approach of being the last one standing. It was effective, don't get me wrong, but this win isn't, and I'm sure nor will it ever be talked about as one of the greatest international victories we've ever seen. But here's the thing. To dismiss Portugal as mere opportunists is to miss the bigger picture entirely. International tournaments are not leagues. How many times have we seen the Champions League winner be a team that did nothing in their domestic league and vice versa? It's a different ballgame entirely, and to dismiss Santos' pragmatism in this regard as cowardice is silly. It was realism. They weren't the outsiders that Greece were in 2004, but in some ways they weren't a million miles away either. That squad as a whole was not the best they've ever had, which is only greater epitomised by the goal scorer in the final. Santos had made a calculation that if his nation couldn't blow teams away, the next best option was to attempt to neutralise them. Croatia had creativity to burn, but couldn't find a goal. Poland, after a fast start, could suddenly not find a route to Lewandowski, and France, in spite of their great quality and home nation status, could not find a breakthrough. That's not to say they didn't have their moments either. The matches versus both Hungary and Wales did show that Portugal could turn it on when they had to. Even the stat of only winning once in 90 minutes, whilst true, doesn't tell the whole story. Portugal weren't aiming to speedrun the tournament, they were masters of in-game management, seeking out moments, leaning on fitness, utilising their squad and being mentally resilient. Cristiano Ronaldo is a mentality monster, but so was Pepe, Carvalho and Rui Patricio. Not every champion dazzles. They don't all redesign the wheel. Some endure and outlast, like Greece in 2004, but also like Italy in 82 and Uruguay in 1950. So they were a bit boring. Does it make their trophy any less shiny? Do the history books put an asterisk next to their name? It may matter for the neutrals, but I doubt there's any Portuguese man or woman out there that will tell you they wished it had turned out any different. To conclude this, regardless of narrative or opinion, Euro 2016 was a seismic moment in the history of the Portuguese national team. It ended the stigma of being nearly men or a tier below the elites. So often too is that once you pick up one crown, many may follow. Perhaps the recent example of Spain's eventual success in 2008 after decades without silver is a story worth emulating. Since this victory, 2 more titles have followed in the newly created UEFA Nations League, winning in both 2019 and just months ago in 2025. This should also be seen as a cautionary tale as well though. Portugal's triumph, as much as it was groundbreaking, is unlikely to be a blueprint for future success. Spain and Germany in recent years were able to develop a style that could be replicated and tweaked, but surviving your way to finals is not a well-trodden path to victory. It tends to be the anomalies in history. But maybe those days are gone anyway. This Portugal side we're watching create their own journeys now is abundantly more talented than the side of 10 years ago. Now, whether or not it leads to more success is questionable for now, but it does bring optimism that more days like that one in Paris are to come in the Portugal story. The 2026 World Cup may just come at the crescendo of many of this side's most talented players. Coupled with some emerging stars, and maybe Martinez's men will be feeling hopeful that football's grandest prize could be on the horizon. Either way, it's hard to imagine that it will take Portugal another 95 years to win another title. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching.